talk about selflessness at the end, because when you talk about aspiration in the beginning, I was wondering, how can you square aspiration, even in the sense of, this is what I'm wishing for, not so much what I'm expecting. How can you ever square aspiration with truly actually inhabiting, accepting the moment, and also from a point of view of a just awareness and not being the self? And so I think what I'm trying to get here, like, is there a wholesome way of aspiring that doesn't undermine this dissolution of a self, if that makes any sense?
Could you hear that?
No.
Okay, so if the question, as I understood it, was to summarize: how can you bring together having an aspiration in a way that doesn't reinforce a sense of self, right? Of someone having the aspiration. And so is that basically...
That was a lot better.
You know, very often when the Buddha was asked what he teaches, kind of the simplest expression in what he said he just teaches suffering and the end of suffering. That's what it's all about. You know, people can create a lot out of that, and then the traditions have built up a tremendous body of teachings about it, but that's what it comes down to. Suffering and the end of suffering, and then hopefully the motivation to help others come to the end of suffering, but that's what it's about. And so we can just see certain qualities in the mind, and these traditionally are called the wholesome qualities. The wholesome qualities of mind, all of which are selfless. They're just qualities or factors of mind which function in their own particular way: mindfulness, love, compassion. And in the practice of them, they bring certain results. And so an aspiration can be held as a skillful understanding of what leads to the end of suffering. And why it's helpful is that it motivates us to actually continue the practice. One of the difficulties you may be having is, in conventional language, we speak of self and others. So I say, yeah, it helps us kind of actualize the possibility of freedom. So just in ordinary language, okay, there's an us trying to actualize. But that's just the conventional level. It really means understanding these qualities lead to these results. Right? And so if the aspiration is the end of suffering, then we say, okay, what are the causes that lead to the end of suffering? Now, what do I want to say here? It may be that some people are not interested in the end of suffering. Right? So there's no obligation to end our suffering. But if through our experience it seems like a good idea, so then the Buddha laid out the path to that. And we may start the path maybe from a stronger sense of self. Yeah, I really want to come to the end of suffering, and that may be what motivates us. But as we get into the practice, that strong selfing falls away, and then it's just endless empty phenomena rolling on. So it actually starts with what you were suggesting, but then changes into this effortless, impersonal flow of understanding cause and effect. These mind states lead to this, other mind states lead to that. So there's that process of letting go of the selfing as the motivation. At least that's been my experience.
I would like to know if the unconditioned is tangible reality or just an appearance.
So the question was whether the unconditioned is its own reality or just an appearance. Is that correct? It is definitely its own reality. So, okay, this gets complicated. First, to say that different traditions have different understandings of what the unconditioned means. So there is not a uniformity of belief that it's talking about the same thing, even though they're using the same word. So I'll just give you an example of this. And I'll use a synonym for unconditioned, because it may be clearer. Often in Buddhist texts, they use the term for the unconditioned, the unborn. Right? So that's a common term in Buddhism, the unborn. Unborn can mean two different things. Unborn can mean always existing. Therefore, it was not born. It was always existing. The other meaning of unborn is non-occurrence, non-appearing. So these are two very different things. Do you see the difference? Yeah. So some traditions say the unconditioned or the unborn it's an awareness that is always present. The other sees awareness itself as being conditioned, and that the unborn or unconditioned transcends awareness. So these are two very different understandings. And for me, this created a big problem. Because as many of you know, I had been very immersed in the Theravada teachings of Vipassana for 20, 30, 40 years at the time, when I then began practicing and studying a little bit of Tibetan Dzogchen. And they were talking about two very different understandings of the ultimate reality. And I was on one retreat. It was a 2-month retreat. I was torturing myself trying to understand or answer the question, who's right? Because it felt like the whole direction of my practice depended on my answering that question. You know, well, if they're right, I should be doing this practice. And if they're right, I should be doing this one. So after a couple of months of all this going on, I realized I was asking the wrong question. And I began to understand, at least for myself, not to think of these teachings in the different traditions as being ultimate truths, but rather as skillful means for not clinging. Right? So then, it just became so easy to hold all the traditions and practices. Does this help free my mind from clinging? Does this practice help free my mind from clinging? So now, when people ask me what I practice, I say, I practice not clinging to anything as being self, as being I or mine, and then I'm just waiting to see where that leads. Because at this point in my practice, I couldn't begin to answer the question, who's right, about ultimate reality and complete enlightenment. But I know that whatever it is, the foundation of it is the mind of not clinging. And so I see in some way maybe the different traditions and even the different understandings, perhaps, this is just a possibility, that they're referring or they're appropriate for different individuals, depending on their background, their conditioning, even their aspirations. You know, and I don't know, many of you are, quite knowledgeable about Buddhism, but there are different goals that, for some, it's the goal of Buddhahood. For some, it's the goal of arhatship. So these are two different realizations, levels of realization. And different of us may be inspired by one or the other, so that may account also for some of the differences of description, of the unconditioned. So I hope this didn't get too... There's a lot more to say about all this, but that's why I like coming back to the simplicity of suffering and the end of suffering, and just examining that in our own minds and our own experience. And I studied philosophy at university, so my mind was very inclined to these philosophical explorations. But they don't really resolve that question. And for me, coming back to the simplicity of, is there clinging in the mind, is there not? And seeing that really is the cause of suffering. And then I'm kind of interested to see where it goes. Will it be chocolate ice cream or vanilla ice cream? Okay, this is the question side. I keep looking, but...
So I want to follow up on this a little bit, and it might be a bit of a selfish question and maybe not relevant for everybody, but I hope it will be. So when I was listening to your talk, and the title of it was, I think, Liberation through Non-Clinging, so I was very curious about what version of liberation you're going to present. And my background is that I've been following the teachings of Robert Bea, who I know you must be familiar with because you wrote the foreword to the book. And you must also know that the emptiness of awareness comes in maybe 2/3 of the book, and then there's still a third of emptiness of mind, emptiness of time and space. And when I was listening to your talk, I was realizing that the version of liberation maybe you present tonight feels like embodying more the nature of awareness, of going with the flow, less clinging, noticing the desire, the wanting, noticing the currents of thoughts, noticing the dukkha, which I feel a lot of these practices lead to noticing more the awareness and the nature of awareness, but they don't really go necessarily past that. There is still that point of noticing awareness as still an appearance as well. And
Wait, I missed just this last thing you said.
that then still there is that point of arriving at the awareness being an appearance as well. And And I wonder if there is a part 2 to your talk, where you talk about that. Or I wonder as well, since you must have respected the work of Robert Bea, how do you think about all of that teaching, which he lays out and encourages everybody to practice it and to go past that view of awareness as an unconditioned? Yeah, maybe you can share something.
Okay. So she was referencing the teachings of Robert Bea, who was an English teacher who died some years ago. And he wrote this very substantial book on the whole path. And the first part of it is the emptiness, the selflessness of just all phenomena. And it gets to a point, and correct me if I'm not understanding exactly, but the importance of seeing the emptiness of awareness itself. Right? And was wondering, she wasn't hearing that as being part of what I was talking about this evening. And wondering if there was a part 2 or so. It definitely is how I understand things, because from both sides of reflecting on the unconditioned, whether one sees the awareness itself as being conditioned, which is expressed in most of the Theravada traditions, or one sees awareness as being the unconditioned, which is more common in Zen and Tibetan practice, Dzogchen, but in both cases, awareness itself is seen as empty. And this is really important. It's really a critical point, and in my mind, it was implied in what I was saying, even if I didn't say it explicitly. Because very common, a common instruction these days in Buddhist circles is rest in awareness. Just rest in awareness. And that is an important aspect of the practice, but it is possible to rest in awareness with a very subtle identification with that awareness. Right? And awareness itself is subtle, and the identification with it is even more subtle. But it's necessary to see that so that one realizes the empty nature of awareness. So I see that as being the essence of the whole path. Whether one is practicing more in the Theravada style or the Mahayana or Vajrayana style, that emptiness aspect is essential. Yeah. So I don't know whether this will resonate exactly, but if I didn't present that clearly, you could just apply everything I said about emptiness up to that to also include it, because that's how I understand it. Okay, come on, guys. Okay.
I'm curious, you talk about desire and
About?
desire and how problematic it can be to want something. What are your thoughts on looking forward to something? For example, I'm going to Copenhagen in a week, I'm excited, and
Yeah.
go back, and is that problematic in a way?
Yeah.
Or what are your thoughts on that?
You know, it's interesting because just like the word wanting and looking forward or desire for something, those words have multiple meanings. And that's why it gets confusing. Because when we say, you know, very often in Buddhism, you know, we have to give up desire. Well, yes, certain kinds of desire, letting go of them create more peace. But other kinds of desire are just natural functions of having a body and mind. So for me, the key element is whether there's a clinging aspect to it. So if we just see the excitement, you know, and okay, this is just another emotion that has its own feeling to it, and we see it and experience it, and then it's there for a while, and then it's not there, and then maybe it comes again. That's not a problem. But if we start clinging or getting identified with it, and on a more subtle level, reinforcing the sense of self in it, so that's the problematic aspect, not the feeling or emotion itself. So there could be excitement, there could be looking forward, but also as part of the flow of empty phenomena rolling on. You know, so it really would take kind of quite a sincere effort out of interest, just to look at, okay, well, what's in my mind in those times of excitement or looking forward, and then compare it to times when it's not, when that's not there, and just see for yourself, kind of, are you equally at peace or free, whatever word, you know, resonates with you, equally at peace in both, or is one, are you more agitated or clinging or whatever? So you see it for yourself, you know, whether it's just an easeful state of being or not. You know, it's something I should have said at the beginning. Don't believe anything I said. Everything I said is simply an invitation to you to explore for yourselves. And I was just talking about all of this as the ways I've been exploring, you know, and if you find any of it interesting, so then you look, or you might explore in your own ways. But that's the point of it all. It's not about hearing something and believing it. So that's really important. Because for me, that's what attracted me to Buddhism in the first place. You know, the Buddha was not asking us to believe. He was saying, come and see, try it out for yourself. And so I just always appreciated that. Okay, this may be success. Okay, well, it's been a real delight. So thank you.